An old saying goes, if you don't get the girl you love, love the girl you get. Exactly what I did 14 years ago. I was engaged to my dream girl, Lottie, and looking forward to marrying her when she told me that the travel agency where she worked had offered her a 6-month job as their guide in Natal, Brazil. Before we met, she had been their guide for 1 year in Madeira, and it was just because of her skills in the Portuguese language that she got the offer, which she accepted. I understood that she would never want to be an average wife in a Scandinavian county capital after her stay there, and therefore we both, after some serious talk, found out that the best for us was to split up. I thanked her for the time we had spent together and wished her good luck for the future. She found her good luck very soon because, after only a month there, she met and fell in love with a Brazilian airline pilot. When her 6-month contract was over, they married. Soon after she left, I met Catherine, who did her best to comfort me. In fact, she did it so well that she got pregnant, swore that I was the only possible father, told me that abortion was out of the question, and begged me to marry her. Catherine was a typical girl next door, and as my love for her increased every day, we married. 6 months after the wedding, we got a nice boy, and after a further 18 months, we even had a girl. I worked at a construction company where my boss suggested I go for evening classes, which I did. Thanks to my connections via the construction company, we could afford to build a nice house in a popular area. When the girl was 3 years old, we succeeded in getting the children to the nearby daycare, and Catherine got a job at an insurance company. Now at the age of 39, and thanks to my evening class, I had been promoted to boss of a construction team and made rather good money. The kids were 14 and 12, and did well in school. Catherine was 37 and still very good looking. She had recently been promoted to department head manager at the insurance company. Other people regarded us as a happy family, which we, without any doubt, had been for 14 years. Then things went downhill after her promotion to department head manager some weeks ago. It was an important event for her, but quite the opposite for me. I was not even invited to the promotion party. I knew that spouses were always invited to those promotion parties and had been curious about why I wasn't. But I accepted her explanation that nowadays it was only a small internal matter and no other spouses would be there. The party had not been the boring dinner she told me it was, far from it, because she came home at 6 o'clock in the morning, very tipsy, with her hair and makeup in total mess. Obviously, she had even been well treated. Of course, she denied all accusations of cheating. But the party meant a big change in our marriage, unfortunately not for the better, at least not for our children or me. She began to have less time for the family and treated me as some kind of janitor whose duty was to take good care of our house and our cars. Of course, she got a nice increase in her salary, but her private expenses increased even more, so I couldn't mention any advantages at all for the family. Even our sex life decreased from an average of 3 times a week to nothing at all. The first 3 weeks, I accepted her explanation that she had so much to do that she got too tired to do anything in bed. Then I felt disgusted by the thought that she obviously still had an affair with some of the top executives at her work and therefore treated me as some leftover. When she, after 3 weeks, understood that no marriage can survive a non-existent sex life and began her limited attempts to do something to cure that, it was my turn to be too tired at bedtime. At my job, we had just finished an important project, and I had an office job for a while, clearing up papers from the last job and planning for the next very big and important project. During lunch at a downtown restaurant, I met one of Catherine's best friends from her work who told me that it was a pity that I was sick and couldn't attend the pleasant party for Catherine's promotion. For her good luck, one of the other head manager's wives was away on holiday with her parents, so he had been her escort during the evening. When I asked her if other spouses had been there, she told me that as far as she knew, I and the manager's wife were the only absent spouses. I replied, sick. I wasn't even invited to the damn party. What in the hell really happened there? She understood that she had told me too much and refused to say anything further. 2 weeks later, I took action. Our insurance for the house and belongings for the family, which we of course had at Catherine's work, was in my name and had to be renewed. I phoned 2 other companies and accepted the best deal. Then I phoned Catherine's company and canceled my insurance. When the girl at their customer service put all my data into her computer, she sounded surprised and asked me, "Excuse me, but isn't your wife working as a head manager in this building?" "Yes, she is, and it is therefore that I want to skip all connections with your company." "May I ask you why?" This question was exactly what I wanted to hear because the right answer would start gossip around the company. Such gossip usually works as the old saying goes, it begins with a feather and grows to a hen. Therefore, I told her, because your company is treating me as crap, you must know that I wasn't invited to my wife's promotion party. And guess what your top executives did to her during the night? And now I've got a better deal for my insurance with one of your competitors. Thank you, my dear miss, and have a nice day. To my great surprise, somebody who called himself Nick Ford and introduced himself as the manager for favored customers called me at my job within an hour and told me that somebody must have made a terrible mistake. Of course, he should do everything to compensate me for their mistake, and asked me what I wanted. Canceling such a rather small insurance can hardly be regarded as losing a favored customer, so I understood that the gossip was around and this jerk must be involved. No reason to raise hell for not being invited to their party. It's up to them who they want to invite. But I was sure that Catherine had been treated by one or several of their top men during the night, and therefore I decided to have some fun with this Nick and replied, "What mistake? Some stupid secretary forgot to mail your invitation to the promotion party? And Catherine must be totally mad if she didn't understand that something was wrong if her husband was the only spouse who wasn't invited to her promotion party. Who can trust a company with such an idiot in a top position? Not kind to call your wife an idiot. I'm sure she will explain everything when you get home tonight. Please tell me what you want in compensation." "Compensation for what? For you treating my wife as a company whore? Such a pretty hooker is worth a fair price, isn't she? No hard feelings, my friend. A new Mercedes 300 and my humiliation is forgotten, at least for that matter." He burst out laughing. "A good joke indeed. I'll give you 25% off your house and home insurance for the next year. A fair deal, isn't it?" "A shoal, I'll get you fired. Everybody at your damn company seems to be totally mad," I said and hung up. Catherine was waiting for me when I came home. She was red as a tomato in her face and began shouting as soon as I got inside the front door. "What the hell do you mean by calling my job and acting as a lunatic?" "Lunatic? I did fair business and saved a good amount for the family for the next year. Why in the hell did you humiliate me at my job?" For the first time in our marriage, I got angry with her and shouted, "Why? If treating with some company top executives is a part of your new job, be sure that the price will be your marriage. I hope you'll find it worth that." I had never before shouted at her and treated her this way, so she got a shock and ran to the bedroom where she began to cry loudly. The first serious argument in our marriage had reached a timeout, but was not over. I found her cell phone and the battery charger in the kitchen, and knew that she wouldn't come out of the bedroom for a while. I investigated the phone and found some text messages, most of them from a Nick who obviously was the same jerk who had called me earlier. He was in love with her, and a copy of her last reply showed that he was making good progress in his efforts. He called their magical night the best night of his life, and had even sent her several poems of low quality. Neither of them mentioned their activities in plain words. I even noted Nick's phone number so I could get further info about him. Now I wanted to know more, so I searched for her purse, found it, and took her calendar, in which I found a lot of interest. The dates when she'd been out on her girl nights with her new coworkers were marked as in at El Grotto, and she had spent 3 Friday afternoons at the Scandic Motel. I noted that her future plans included Scandic Motel the next Friday and the romantic Spanish restaurant El Grotto on Wednesday evening the week after. Only one thing left for me to do: begin the final countdown of my marriage. But how? I wrote a message to the kids and left the house for some food at my favorite pub. To my great surprise, Lottie, my ex-dream girl from Brazil, was there with her brother. They invited me to sit down at their table, and we had a pleasant chat for several hours. With free airline tickets, Lottie was home visiting her parents almost every year, sometimes alone, sometimes with her family. I had met her now and then, usually when shopping together with Catherine, and only talked a few minutes with her. Lottie had brought her son to a month's language training in England and had extended her trip with a few days at her parents' home. She was now divorced from her airline captain, who couldn't resist the temptation of handsome flight attendants, which had been too often and too much for Lottie to take. I told her that even Catherine and I had serious problems, which we hardly were able to solve. We decided to see each other again when she came back to catch her son in England next month. When I got back home, Catherine was sleeping, or at least pretending to be, so I didn't wake her up or talk to her. The next morning she was still sleeping when I went to work. My boss noted that something was wrong with me and had me tell him the whole story about my marriage, which was expected to crash within a few weeks. He promised to use his connections and fix me a nice apartment, and suggested the board let me be responsible for the insurance quotations for the next huge project. I had investigated the man who had sent texts to Catherine's cell phone. It was Nicholas Thompson, 44 years old, married with 2 daughters, 21 and 18, both still living at home, working as a department head manager at the same insurance company as Catherine. On the Friday afternoon, I went to the Scandic Motel in a company car. Didn't see Catherine's car there, so I phoned her job where they told me she had just left for the day. She arrived in 10 minutes together with a man in his 40s. They went into the cafeteria, bought coffee and a sandwich. I did the same and sat down at their table. Catherine almost lost her composure in total surprise, and I told her, "Nice to see you, my love. I had some private matters to discuss, so I just rang your job, and they told me that you had left for the day. What a surprise to see you here." She didn't reply, so I turned to him and said, "Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I am Anders and Catherine's husband. May I ask who you are?" "Nick Thompson." "Oh, that funny guy who rang me at my job. I'm still surprised by how low you estimated Catherine's services and lost honor." I turned to Catherine and asked her, "Are you coming home with me, or are you staying here with him? If you prefer to stay with him, you can stay here forever." She came with me, and as we sat in my car, she shouted, "What the hell did you tell him about my services?" "What services? When he rang me at my job, he offered to compensate me for what they did to you during the party night. Your friend Nick suggested an amount of about 10% of what an average-looking service provider would charge for equal services. Of course I didn't accept. She refused to say a word to me after that, not even to reply when I suggested counseling to save our marriage. Not a word from Catherine until the next Wednesday when she told me that she was going to a girls' night with her coworkers if I had no objection, and if I had, she was going anyway. I had no objections and wished her a pleasant evening. She left in a taxi, and 10 minutes later, I left for El Grotto in my own car. The restaurant had only a few guests, so I had no problem getting in. I found Catherine and Nick in a discreet booth and went out again and called his wife, who told me he was playing chess with a retired ex-boss from his job. When I told her he had an affair with my wife and I just found them at El Grotto, she promised to catch him. Then I went into their booth and told Catherine, "Girls' night out, indeed. You've got a terrible ugly girlfriend, my dear Aunt Catherine. Do you really have an affair with such a monster?" Nick understood that his odds of winning a fight against me were less than 0, so he kept quiet. Neither of them said anything, so I continued, "As the girls' night seems to be cancelled, it's better to go home at once, or shall we eat first? By the way, Nick, high time to put up your chess game and the old boss, because your wife is on her way here. I'm sure even she wants to know what really happened at the promotion party." Catherine got up and shouted, "At home, jerk?" During the drive home, I told her that total confession, counseling, and hard work on the matter could probably still save our marriage. She didn't answer me, only shouted several times, "You must have the damn party on your mind." 1 week later, the board accepted my boss's suggestion. I got a well-qualified and very handsome, unfortunately already taken female assistant. Our job was to get the best possible quotations from several insurance companies and make them compatible so the board would be able to make the right decision based on equal terms without any hidden traps. A big job with such huge amounts involved. We succeeded in creating the expected interest from the chosen insurance companies. Lena and I worked well together and got everything under control. To my great pleasure, we were invited to a lunch with the top executives and the chairman of the board at Catherine's company. The company where Catherine worked was the only local-based one of those so far involved. It was even the smallest of them. So this time, I was a very important customer. It was their managing director who called me and invited us. My boss got some ideas about the lunch and gave Lena and me useful suggestions about what we were allowed to say and do there. Much more than any of us had expected, indeed. He even gave us orders on how to be dressed. The company paid for an Armani suit for me and an Armani business dress for Lena. The lunch was held at the best restaurant in town, and the insurance company was well represented with all their top executives, department head managers, Catherine included, and their chairman of the board. I noted how surprised Catherine was to see my Armani suit, and she got a strange expression on her face when she tried to sit next to me, and I told her sorry, but I want Lena to sit there because she and I may need to talk. I saw that she was humiliated, and even several of the others noted that I treated her as air. The lunch began with a few words from their chairman, who wished their honorable guests welcome to the meal. Then I rose up and said, "It is a pleasure to introduce my partner, Mrs. Lena Hagen. My name is Anders Eriksson, and some of you may be surprised to know that I'm married to Aunt Catherine, who is here. I'm glad to hear that Mrs. Hagen and I are welcome to your company. I ought to have met all of you before, at least at my wife's promotion party, but for some reason I wasn't regarded as good enough to join her great event. Of course, no hard feelings about that. It's up to you to choose who you want to invite to such events. But if I wasn't regarded as good enough to share a meal with my wife at your company's table then, I'm not today. So one of us, Catherine or I, have to leave this table now. The choice is yours. The silence was so total that if a pin had fallen on the soft carpet, it would have been heard. Both the manager and chairman looked at Catherine, who began to cry, but nothing happened until Lena raised up and made herself ready to go. Then Catherine rushed away from the table. I had remained standing the whole time and continued, "As I told you, no hard feelings about the party, and everything is not only my wife's fault. Obviously, the poor woman has been so eager to get her promotion that she agreed to pay for it with her body, and therefore accepted her plotter's demands to keep me away. I wish I'd get to know which damn disgusting individuals used her during the party night. I already know the name of one of the plotters, who later on humiliated me further by offering me compensation from your company, less than 10% of what a cheap service provider would charge for such a night. Obviously, he regards my wife and me as pure crap." Forgetting this stupid to say what he thought was a fair value of my wife's lost honor, I suggested a low bait, a Mercedes. But in his opinion, Catherine is only worth 10% of a service provider. Of course, I don't want anything from your company, and we, Lena and I, have promised our managers not to have any personal vendetta against you, and to give your company fair treatment in the insurance matter. However, I must say that it is impossible for me to eat without feeling sick if your Mr. Nick Thompson is sitting at the same table. So once again, he or we. This time there was no silence. The chairman shouted, "Thompson, get out." Nothing more happened during the meal, and Lena and I spent the rest of the day with those of their people responsible for our quotation. Their manager and the chairman joined us for a coffee break and told me that my problems were under investigation. So far, Nick Thompson and one of the vice managing directors who had been responsible for her promotion were fired, and the investigation continued. Catherine had left the job directly from the lunch. The manager told me that they did not understand why she did what she did because she was in line to be promoted the right way. Now they had to fire her because it was impossible for the company to have a department head manager with such a reputation. Back at our own office, my boss was satisfied when he listened to the tape recorder Lena used to have in her handbag during meetings outside the office. I got his full support for my speech during the lunch. When I came home rather late, I found that Catherine was gone with 2 suitcases and a large quantity of her clothes. At the kitchen table, I found a note to the kids in which she told them to call her parents for further information. Not a word to me. Catherine and I filed for divorce, sold the house, and shared everything 50-50. I got the nice apartment I was waiting for, and for the kids' sake, I even fixed an apartment for her near mine. We are now on speaking terms again and have met a few times at a cafe to talk about our children's activities. They live at her apartment but spend a lot of time at my place. Catherine is even a soccer mom for our daughter's soccer team. We even used to meet when the team plays and have begun to have some small talk. She has a new job at an office, but the payment is far less than what she got at the insurance company, even less than what she got before her promotion. Neither Catherine nor I have found a new, right one yet. I can't deny that I miss her sometimes, and I think we both regret what we did to each other. But done is done, and can never be undone. However, even though the now infamous lunch cost me my marriage, Lena and I succeeded in negotiating the best insurance terms our company ever had before, which gave us fairly increased salaries. When Lottie was back to catch her son in England, she spent several nights at my place. Our time together was okay, but not the same sparks we felt during our engagement. I must confess that my time with Catherine was much better before her promotion. However, I have promised to spend my next holiday as her guest in Brazil, but I will never stay there forever, and she will never leave her home there. But it is an interesting country to visit, and I really look forward to it.